Hello, welcome to, our session on Aid Without Borders, Blockchain's Role in Humanitarian and Emergency Response. My name is Maciej Pulanda. I will be moderating this session um, where we'll explore how blockchain is reshaping the future of aid. Uh, you'll hear from pioneers testing these ideas in real crisis, from Ukraine and Afghanistan to Peru and Nepal. So let's explore how we move from promise to proof. Panelists, I will direct questions to one, two, or three of you at a time, but feel free to jump in to build on each other. Uh, so we'll begin, and when I ask you, please also quickly introduce yourself. Um, so let's start with the topic of blockchain efficiency in fragile settings. I will direct that to Carmen and Antonella first to talk about their perspective and their experience from their work. So, what's the most significant efficiency gain you've seen using blockchain in fragile or remote context, and what made it work? Maybe let's start with Antonella.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much. I'm Antonella from Argentina. We are a blockchain lab and we have been developing many solutions for financial inclusion with the help and mentorship of UNICEF. Regarding your question, I think one of the biggest efficiency gains that we've seen is that with blockchain, we can actually direct our money goes directly to people, and usually we are reaching them very fast and securely. That is vital in this kind of context where they need, because of an emergency situation, or that is something that we found is one of the biggest efficiencies. For example, you were mentioning Cusco, Peru. We've decided to pilot the solution that we made that allows digital payments to be done in places without internet. And we chose Cusco, Peru, because we found out that 80% of the households didn't have internet, and this population was left out of digital payments. So we tested there, and thanks to blockchain, people could actually go to the local market and buy fruits and vegetables. It was very simple because by pushing the limits and building for people without smartphones, bank accounts, or internet, we found out that we were using natural language. So they would receive a text and they could pay with an OTP or a temporary code. And we included these people, and their feedback was it was really easy to use, and it was a great success for us. But I would say that not only rural areas suffer from digital infrastructure, because we tested another solution in Buenos Aires, in our country, Argentina, and we were working with remote workers, and we found out that they did have smartphones and data, but not enough. So they were answering to us on and off, and we found out after talking to them that they didn't have enough data, so they were like connecting through different Wi-Fi's, and that's why the conversation was kind of broken. And we have so many pilots and insights. We were running an personal finance educational program in Tucumán, another province in our country, and people had smartphones, but when we told them that they had to download an app, they said, we don't have space in our phones to download another app. So we found out during the years that sometimes we need to prepare solutions and make them not only very easy to use, but also consider that even if they have data, they might not have enough, or their phones might not have enough storage to download. So
Yeah.
I would say that's one of the best things that blockchain could have done for us.
Yeah, cutting the distance, but yeah, always those feedbacks are often very surprising. So Carmen, if I may direct the question to you, and that is actually more you know, relevant in terms of the fragile context, especially in Ukraine. So what is your experience in that context?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So my name is Carmen Het. I'm UNHCR's treasurer. So I'm all about looking after the money and making sure the money goes from A to B, and we establish trust with the donors, and basically from the source to the end use, and making contextually it work. So I think what Antonella described is, the underlying technology, how you actually process data, is well established in blockchain. And then we have another element, which is to make sure that the flow of money also follows through. So myself, I'm quite passionate on the treasury side to have that visibility and that real time, all the time, on any device. So I would say on any device. So it's not about just a smartphone, it's the device that is contextually relevant in that context. Now, in the case of Ukraine, UNHCR, some years now ago, we launched it in 22 in December. So we launched basically a fully integrated solution on stablecoin, and basically delivering the USDC on a digital wallet and a non-custodial wallet, and then with encashment solutions that are inbuilt into the wallet, as many solutions that we can envisage. So it can contain solutions for actual fiat, so fiat encashment, but it can also use solutions that allow money to be transferred to existing bank accounts. So it works for both the banked and the unbanked. And of course, digital ID is intrinsically linked to these solutions to make sure that we know our people. So know your refugee, not know your customer, know your refugee. And so we want to limit as little data that goes onto the flow of funds. So, if it's the phone number, it can be the phone number, it can be date of birth, just for a simple authentication. But the idea is to limit any data going through the rails in that sense. So we full data protection to make sure that that the delivery of aid is really guaranteed and ensured with the utmost integrity for everyone. So when we say anytime, anywhere, on any device, I think that is really possible. So I think the promise of the technology is that many things are possible, but the key is really to go into the design, how you design this. That hasn't gone away. So it's not just a miracle. So it's not a miracle to talk about blockchain.
Yeah,
I think the key is really contextually to design it, to make it relevant in those jurisdictions. And then in the jurisdiction, when you talk about fragile, the key is also whether these solutions are actually portable cross-border. So in the case of Ukraine, these solutions were portable to go elsewhere. So if today they are in Ukraine and tomorrow they're in Poland or in Germany or elsewhere, they can still actually transact. So the key is really to have this portability all the time, and I would say equip refugees, to go forward. Is like a tool bag that they have, and have their wallet. So they basically have their bank account in their pocket if we do this right.
absolutely.
So I'll stop here.
Thank you. Yeah, there are different conflicts, different contexts, and certainly Ukraine offered a very different context for humanitarian aid, especially in terms of moving across borders to Poland and to other European countries where infrastructure is much more developed. So let's move actually to places where the infrastructure is not so developed and it's more challenging, and also the access is very limited. And we'll talk about different type of access. So what is the aid in conflict in sanctioned areas and economies? So maybe we'll start with Sanzar from HesapPay. In conflict areas or sanctioned countries, economies, how does blockchain protect aid flows, and what risks remain?
Sure. So I'm with HesapPay. We do distributions for aid, about several dozen different humanitarian aid organizations, help them with cash and also with merchant payments instead of waiting in line for hours to get cash. And in Afghanistan, at least, there's a lot of risks to make sure that you're giving it to people that really need it, to make sure that they're able to access it, that you don't have duplicates, that it's not being funneled to other areas, for example. And so there's several horror stories that I witnessed myself. We met one beneficiary that had 7 different entitlement cards from 7 different organizations. And so he would just go around and receive help from everyone else. There wasn't a permanent immutable ledger that could verify, okay, this person has already received funding from several other organizations. And instead of reaching out to people that needed it, more vulnerable people, it was being doubled up on the same people that voices were loudest or at that certain particular area. So you have to imagine that before blockchain or before HesapPay, many of our clients were taking sacks of cash, literally, on their backs and go out to these remote villages and with a piece of paper say, okay, whose name is so and so, and then make them do a fingerprint or sign. And that was in the best case. In the worst case, that person would go and just do a bunch of fingerprints himself and said, oh, look, I gave it to everyone that needed it. Wink, wink, don't worry about it. Your money is in safe hands. And so being able to bring a certain amount of transparency, a certain ledger that would follow that people can independently audit it, as opposed to just asking the provider, hey, tell us, what you did and give us a report, report. Blockchain allows us to distribute to those individuals and then allows the partners or the humanitarian aid agencies, the donors, to be able to independently verify, oh, yes, it did go, and then it went here and here and here and here. They can trace the entire flow of funds. In sanctioned areas, that's also very important to make sure where's the social funds, what they're spending it on, where is it going, understanding that money to make sure it doesn't end up in the wrong hands.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And Sandra, now you've been working on projects with HesapPay, also in Syria, so another challenging context. So how do you handle compliance and de-risking in these environments?
Yeah, thanks. And hi, everybody. I run the Humanitarian Venture Lab at Mercy Corps Ventures. I think, all of these issues are intertwined, right? And I think that, especially for a general audience like we might have in this conference, it's important to take a step back and remember that in these types of situations, aid is supposed to be protected, right? Like, this is international humanitarian law. These are like humanitarian obligations to continue to deliver in these situations on the assumption that that aid is protected. In reality, most of the time, it is not. As conflicts get worse and as they last longer through time, so Afghanistan being a great example, Syria also a good example, Haiti, DRC, we have plenty of places like this, then infrastructure starts to erode. And the interest of banks, especially when a country is sanctioned, to operate in those environments, because they're being over-compliant and because they're de-risking, means that the infrastructure that you need to deliver people who are suffering from that conflict erodes and disappears, as you're moving through an operation where the situation is getting worse and worse. So, I think it's important for people to bear in mind that when that happens, humanitarian organizations are resorting to more and more risky routes to move cash into these areas, whether it be to provide in-kind assistance or to give people cash to pay for things on the open market. And as humanitarian actors engage in those risky behaviors, of course, the money that's going to people is not only at risk, it's often being trucked, like in cash across high insecurity areas. And also, it's completely non-transparent, right? When somebody carries cash on their back and says they gave it to somebody, you can create a mound of paper. You can create an enormous paper trail, but there's no real verification, including by that individual, that they received that assistance. So I think I think about blockchain infrastructure as a way to sort of like carve out safe corridors for humanitarian aid that at the same time also address the problems that go with, the risky behaviors we engage in because we have the obligation to deliver in those locations. But I think something other people don't talk about that often is the fact that, unfortunately, in the humanitarian sector, we defer a lot of these risks to the local partners that we work with. And enabling those local partners to distribute digitally significantly reduces those risks. So protecting humanitarian workers at the last mile, in addition to protecting the people who are receiving the assistance that they're supposed to receive, for me, is the biggest benefit of using this technology. And of course, in these environments, especially sanctioned, you have way more questions about how the money is being used. So having that single unified ledger, that can prove that people received the assistance that they needed more quickly and with less risk, is the main value add for blockchain in these contexts. And it's no coincidence that we see increasing uptake by organizations in some of these more extreme contexts.
Yes, thanks. There's a lot of themes coming together. It's certainly as I've seen in a chat from the audience, questions about how that affects funding. We'll get to that in a moment and talk about fundraising. But I would like to stop here and talk about new also models of aid. So you, Sandra, have in Nepal and elsewhere worked on anticipatory action, so which shifts from reactive to proactive and anticipating aid. So how does blockchain, alongside other technologies, help to act earlier, and why is it important?
I think this is a relatively new use case to the humanitarian sector. The insurance sector knows this use case very well. That when you are using advanced infrastructure like blockchain, you also have advanced functionality. You have the capacity to connect different streams of data or different data sets, combine them, and then attach money to a purpose that's dictated by what's in those data sets. So in anticipatory action programs, which are very much a la mode in the humanitarian sector, because they save money, when you provide people assistance before a disaster, you're saving a lot more in terms of what their potential losses are afterwards, in addition to helping them prepare. So this blockchain use case is building more on and exploiting more the functions and features of the infrastructure itself, like smart contracts that allow you to make trigger-based transfers to individuals, like data oracles that are sucking in the climate data that you need to define that trigger so that those funds are released to these individuals if rainfall exceeds a certain amount in a specific geographic area. Or, for example, if you have a sudden onset hazard like a cyclone that's 72 hours out, you can program triggers that will release funds to people in that impact zone at 72 hours, at 48 hours, at 24 hours, and sort of like narrow down the channeling of assistance in these anticipatory cases as you go. So, I mean, by comparison, the cash use case is sort of basic, but I think what we're seeing with anticipatory action is the utility of the technology in automating processes, especially involving multiple stakeholders, that otherwise are sometimes even prohibitively complicated for like local organizations to implement, or even for bigger organizations to implement sustainably over time.
Yeah, which opens also doors for more localized anticipatory financing. So now talking about financing, I would want to direct a next question to Mario from MSF. Staking pools and NFTs are engaging engaging new donors. You've been working on that yourself. What's working, and how does this shift power or flexibility in humanitarian funding?
Yeah, thank you. Greetings, everyone. Greetings from Geneva. So my name is Mario Stefan, and among other things, I look into our Web3 projects. But more specifically, and I think to answer that question, message, I think the most important bit is maybe to discuss blockchain philanthropy, because I think one needs to address those considerations, not from a technical perspective only, even though the technology and blockchain technology allows us options and possibilities that we didn't have in the past. But I think it's important to look into the values. And this is how we started at MSF looking into it, because we saw a lot of overlaps with, I would say, the Web3 community at large, and our values, the values that we carry as an organization. So there was really the ground for us to build new communities of supporters, to be introduced to new communities of supporters, to journey together, which is basically what we're trying to do through our projects. That would be the first aspect. The second aspect is to see the amount of empathy and solidarity that we have. In all the NFT holders, decentralized finance, blockchain aficionados, there is a high level of solidarity. And there's been to date, unfortunately, a high level of scams and swindles. I think the conflict in Ukraine for us was an eye-opener in terms of the number of attempts to basically just rob you, of your crypto, or ask you to buy obscure NFTs that would help the people of Ukraine, whatever that meant, unfortunately, and people being taken advantage of. And seeing that you do need a certain number of guarantees to have trust in the medium that you are choosing to basically support a cause here or support a cause there. So it's really looking into all those aspects that made us reflect on the fact that this is a community we are not reaching today with our traditional means. This is a community that shares our way of looking at things. And this is a community that wants to do things that are impactful, that wants to make a difference on the ground, that believes in an approach to social justice in which we recognize ourselves. Having people taking advantage of good intentions is as old as as the world, unfortunately. But luckily, we know how to address that in our other ways of working. So it kind of was a perfect mix for us to get into it. Now, the challenge is mostly building the trust and building those communities. And this is what we're trying to do through projects around NFTs, through projects around liquid staking, which are the projects that we have started with. Again, of course, the financial objective is there, obviously, because what we want is to be able to get that support to the people on the ground where it really matters. But also, and again, I will never say it enough, it's really to build legitimacy. So we have to be quite humble, to build trust. People would trust MSF. People don't know MSF necessarily, or we're very lucky to have a strong brand in the sense that people know the logo, people know the name, but they don't necessarily know how we work and what makes us stand out compared to others, and therefore why it would make sense to support MSF among other entities or organizations that you are supporting. I'll leave it at that, because this is really, for me, the main message. We can always discuss later on about the technology itself and what it specifically allows us to do. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, and you touched on a great point. Not many people know that MSF actually does not take funding from sources where most other organizations do. So that's very different. But Carmen, UNHCR also now is exploring staking pool as a source of funding.
Yeah.
What's your strategy? And maybe you can just briefly talk about how does it work for you?
Yeah. So I think staking pool, gives us access to a crypto native community in general, but also it's obviously diversifying the streams to come in, the funds to come in. So the colleagues, Switzerland for UNHCR, have been pioneering the staking pool, but it also involves how you actually set up the custodian on digital assets. And we go into quite quickly into treasury technical areas where we need to make sure that we have the tools again available to collect the rewards from the staking. Basically, that's what this is about. But I would say that what is really attractive in that sense is that we have outflows, so we have rails on crypto native enabled to reach the people in need. And if we can also fundraise on the crypto side of things, then the two things really become powerful, if you like. So if you like, your staking rewards, will go directly to programs and purpose-led, like Sandra was basically explaining. There are other ways of providing the value transfer. And for that matter, it also offers opportunities to different, availability of the credentials in the wallet that I described before, because it could be that value transfer for education, value transfer for medical. So that you can go to a hospital and get your vaccine or your aid at the hospital, whatever you need. So I think it's the connectivity. So it's got to get connected with all these tools, from philanthropy, marketplaces, the many words we can describe it, but it also needs the rails, not just to collect, but the rails also to bring that money straight to where it's needed. So it's not just about collecting per se, it's about collecting with that purpose, and to make sure that that ecosystem is open for delivery. So that's why I'm kind of passionate about all of this, because it has ultimately something to do, with treasury digital management as well, and having, digital assets in treasury. So any of the organizations will have to think about this as well, how to manage digital assets, not just fiat and then go into digital and back, just to stay in actually digital. So I think that it gives great opportunity. I think it's the design options are, the imagination is our limitation here, because a lot of things can be structured. So yeah, UNHCR has a staking pool, and since some time, I think since 2-3 years now, we are scaling up as well. So it depends which network, which blockchain. So we can get technical, but I won't go there. So which blockchains you can basically use on the staking, and obviously what is important is the community that is around that blockchain as well.
Yeah.
So I would say from the NFT side, UNHCR also has pioneered on auctioning NFTs through Christie's. We had artists preparing NFTs with a refugee thematic, and they were auctioned off. So as I said, I think our imagination is the only limit here. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. So there was a question. Maybe I will take it from the audience, because it touches really upon exactly that. There was a case. I'm quoting the question. I don't know exactly the facts here, but it's very probable that there was a NFT that raised about millions of dollars for Ukraine and has been misappropriated. But how can we, Mario? How can we really make sure that this does not happen when you are working with that? what are your what is your take on that?
I mean, I think one just needs to be, from a, let me put it this way, from a project management perspective, when I am setting up an initiative like this one, the devil is in the details. And I think that the level of security that you achieve in the project that you are building, the level of sophistication in a way you would have in your smart contract programming, the guarantees, the different guarantees that you put on the table, all those might sound a bit disconnected and might stem from, a compliance perspective, a quality perspective, but at the end of the day, they result in trust. And I think that at the end, the transparency and the traceability that you offer as an organization in terms of what am I going to do and how am I going to do it, is basically what reassures you. I think it's new territory for a lot of people, and this is why I say we need to be modest as organizations investing in that. So for me, the risk, it's not about whether there is a risk or not. It's about how you manage the risk and what are the guarantees that you offer in general. And through your approach, through the type of project that you're building, through the seriousness that you put into it, and that you clarify. And the beauty of blockchain is that everything is transparent. So you are able to see basically what you're doing, and you're able to see who you're supporting. I think those are considerations that tend to mitigate a bit the risk, if I may.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, staying on the topic of guardrails. I mean, we talked about a lot about that, but I think it's really important to talk about the boundaries, red lines, and also ethics, right? In that, Carmen has been talking about that already with the amount of personal information on chain, which I think is a great lesson taken from not so fortunate events in Bangladesh, but also Sandra has mentioned how important that is on the sort of design inclusive perspective. So what ethical boundaries or risks do you see in blockchain for aid, and how do we safeguard against them? Maybe Sandra, you want to touch upon that, and feel free anyone to add to it.
Yeah, I'm sure others can jump in. At the risk of repeating what I said in the last Blockchain for Good event, I think a major area that organizations need to understand that they have the responsibility to address is upscaling awareness and education on what blockchain is, how it is useful for the humanitarian sector, what differentiates a stablecoin from Bitcoin, for example, all throughout the humanitarian giving chain, from institutional donors to implementing organizations. Because I think it isn't until we know we have those skills internally that organizations can be trusted to use this technology responsibly, and select solutions in a responsible and context appropriate way. But to go back to the point that we were making around conflict, let's say fragile and conflict affected areas, we need to remember that the longer organizations wait to look into whether this technology can help them to safeguard and expedite the delivery of humanitarian assistance in those scenarios, the more organizations are going on year after year at accumulating this risk that is associated with moving money in cash, dealing with third parties that may carry counterparty risk. Those risks are basically still being incurred, and the aid that's being delivered is being put at risk as long as organizations are not making the effort to look into this as a safer option. So yeah, that's where I land.
Mario, your take on that?
Look, I think the ethical risks here again, and at the risk of repeating myself a bit like what Sandra was saying, I don't think that there are more, and this might sound controversial, but more red lines or more ethical risks here than there are in any other avenue that we engage in as an organization, to be very honest. I mean, you will have some specifics. We look a lot into the environmental footprint of the technology that we use, of the blockchains that we use. We look very carefully into what cryptocurrencies we want to engage with. And I guess this stems also, it's our own red lines or our own approach, because we want to be coherent in whatever project we're doing, whether we're supporting a hospital on the front line or whether we're setting up a fundraising project. Obviously it translates differently depending on what you're working on, but I think our approach is roughly similar. So a lot of us here around the table and beyond within the community are principled organizations and principled entities, and we work with a whole set of principles. And one can talk about the risk of security risk or money or something disappearing, your project being hit, etc. But I'd rather think about what we call the do no harm principle, in terms of whatever projects we are setting up, that there is always a reflection as to what it is that we are actually provoking on the ground.
Correct.
Are we opening doors that we're not able to close? Are we setting up standards that will be very difficult for the community to sustain afterwards? And I think we're in that situation here with projects like that. What we chose to do, and this is us, and this is one approach among many, and let me be very clear, is to start working on building the community, on developing on resource mobilization among the community, and saying, okay, by the moment we get the financial support in place, let's discuss together where we're going to put it, why we've deciding to put the funds in on this project or that project, and how we're going to do it. And let's, as much as possible, because again, this is a technology that allows us to have those type of exchanges, let's try to decide together sometimes on some aspects and see where we want to go with the amount of motivation that we've done. So there's always a challenge here. There are some risks, there are some red lines, as always. But I think at the end of the day, a principled organization looking into not doing any harm and keeping, in our case, our patients, but because we're a medical organization, but keeping our patients at the center of the consideration, meaning very practically, what does it mean to have that project support an activity in a particular environment, is really the only question that I want to ask ourselves in terms of determining the risks and the red lines.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very true compared to AI. I think within at least blockchain space in this context, there's not so much need, one would say, to think about anticipating the risks. But there is one question that I would like to read out. We don't need to maybe answer it, but I think it's worth bringing this, because it touches upon a question of also design and how design can influence behavior changes. Does the financialization of community relationships through tokenization in blockchain network had risks or has risks of commodifying solidarity? I think this is interesting take on how design can actually create certain changes on the ground. So what we talked about just now touched also on being open and transparent. So I would like to bring up this aspect of openness and open source tools like DPGs, so digital public goods, which can help blockchain solutions in this sector. And I would like to Antonella to talk a little bit about why, in their project, why they decided to become digital public good, and how that influences their work.
Thank you. Well, in our experience, for a solution, a blockchain solution to scale needs two key components. One is the open infrastructure, and the other one is the strong local collaboration. While building on blockchain, open source is vital. We have this sentence that says, "Don't trust, verify." And this explains a little bit why blockchain has gone so fast in such a short time, because while you're building open source and following the digital public good standards, that which means no vendor locking, developing with the best practices and other guidelines, you are inviting everyone to collaborate. It's like kind of a humanitarian collective intelligence, building the best products, and you can also audit them. So it's kind of a trust system. And for us, we've seen it firsthand. It saves costs, increases transparency, and you build faster. So, and here I would like to make a point of interoperability, because we've advanced so much in this field, but still there is so much to do. For example, we started building a solution where we use 7 different smart contracts, but then they didn't work together. So we have to iterate, and these things I think in the future will be faster. And in the second hand, when I mentioned digital public goods, government, and local collaboration, it's vital to engage with them, because we need to co-design our solutions with governments. For example, in Argentina, we were working with Buenos Aires City. In Venezuela, we had to integrate with Megasoft, the payment processor. And in Ghana, with UNICEF, we are co-designing in order to allow people to off-ramp with mobile money, for example. Our solution, like our technology, even if it was built open source with digital public good, if we didn't offer the end-to-end solution, it wouldn't have been scalable. So I would summarize like saying open source digital public good is like the foundation to scale. And then NGOs, local governments, and organizations gives you the context and trust to make it work. And the interoperability makes sure that the system doesn't remain isolated in the future.
Thanks, Antonella. This is this is definitely a theme that I've seen across the projects. The interoperability is definitely a challenge, also with other technologies, off ramps, etc. So we have just 3 minutes left. So I would like to basically do like a very rapid fire answer. Sanzar, what is your biggest lesson out of all the work that you've done in Afghanistan and elsewhere with HESAPay?
Sure. I think the biggest lesson was to realize that a lot of the blockchain solutions tend to lend towards people that have phones or electricity or ID cards or internet, and so we moved very quickly to our programs, just say, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't have a phone or electricity or internet or anything, we can just give you a card. And so we distribute now for all of our programs just a plastic, debit card that they can then use to spend. And so it doesn't have any prerequisites, and that doesn't assume that people would have something in those particular communities. So making sure that there's no prerequisites opens up the gamut to a bigger population.
Thank you. Carmen, what is your biggest lesson out of working with this technology?
It's to look at integration end to end. So it's not just looking at how you fundraise or how you have smarter resource allocation. So you have to have a few things in mind when you design. So a lot of things come together. It's seamless, and it has to it has to be obviously transparent, and you have that speed and you have that reporting, which is done automated. I think a lot of us in that sector here are, consistently looking at reporting, which is incredibly cumbersome, back to donors. This should be all available, and using best practices to make sure the flows have full integrity. So whether it's the data, the flow of data, or the flow of money, or the flow of value, that this is, fully traceable.
Thank you. Actually, we do have, I'm told that we can have a few minutes, take a few minutes more, and maybe to answer some of the questions from the audience. So maybe one question that that caught my attention, and it's something that I also have thought about. So it is interesting that people keep quoting the situation and experiments with Ukraine, but there are hardly any efforts mentioned when it comes to Palestine. Do you panelists know of any examples or reference to this? And would you like to comment on that?
I'm happy to jump in on that. So Palestine is extremely difficult. It's hard to even get water and food there, as people are being massacred, and so trying to also extremely difficult. Is very, very difficult. But there is now an effort to try to start a distribution program through that, given a lot of the traditional ways of payment have kind of collapsed, and so in order to help people, and that might be coming out, you'll be hearing about it very soon. But it's much more difficult to operate in there, just because the borders have been sealed off, through the occupying forces.
Master Cha, I can step in quickly. I think just to make sure on the question, I don't think it's a matter of experimenting with Ukraine. I think that there's different environments of intervention where organizations have been working all around the world, either implementing solutions or, like us, gathering or mobilizing support to support the existing programs. But Ukraine, when it happened, corresponded at a moment in time, and we know that our industry has its ups and downs and has its specific moments, corresponded at a time, if we want to talk about NFTs, for instance, just one example, where there was a huge boom around it and a huge financial incentive that has reduced tremendously since. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it as experiments. I would just look at it in terms of, right place, right moment. I'm not going to repeat what Sanzar said. Unfortunately, he's absolutely right. It's extremely, it's extremely difficult to provide support, and it's extremely difficult to provide support to our Palestinian colleagues that are on the ground and have been working nonstop. Now, again, we are here maybe discussing solution or discussing approaches, but the reality on the ground doesn't change. As far as we're concerned, Palestine today, unfortunately, is way up there in terms of the biggest crisis that we are managing. And I know that others around the table here face the same situation. So if there is something specific that we can do here, that's great. But I think it kind of brings us back to the idea of what we are trying to develop here, what we are trying to support, each one of us, if I may, is new tools, new approaches, and new ways. But are we able to break a reality that unfortunately is bigger than us? Sadly, I don't think we can. That's just to make sure that we are clear on what we are discussing here. I would hate to think that we would be categorizing crisis, in terms of this is a bigger, this is a smaller. I don't think that's the case at all, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that intervention. Eh, there was also a remark in the chat that did recognize a recent pilot, recent intervention that NRC did in Sudan. There's actually extremely interesting things happening regarding blockchain, but also just really trying different solutions in Sudan. And this is also another context where conflict, which is not given enough attention, and is one of the longest conflicts in the world. Unfortunately, we have to finish right now. There's so many things that we could cover in this conversation. But I would like to thank you for joining us, and thanks to our panelists for spotlighting the practical and principled path forward from conflict response to future focused finance. It's very clear that blockchain can help bridge trust gaps and make aid more responsive. So let's keep pushing that frontier together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I was just about to add that you can continue this conversation in the matchmaking lounge. So you might find a table with the title of this session. So I invite you all to please go ahead there and engage with the audience in case you still have some time left. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
To the audience, I would like to show you how you can use the speed networking session right now. Okay, so let me quickly share my screen. Okay, so I hope you guys can listen to me and see my screen. So if you can see here right now, if you click on the agenda, there's this thing called matchmaking session where you can just go there and click on join session now. Okay, yeah, sorry, found it. Okay, so here, if you click on join now, you will be taken to this session where you will be randomly matched with somebody and you'll have a chance to have a talk with them for 1 to 3 minutes. And if when you're done speaking with them, you can click on next match and you'll be connected with someone else. I hope that was helpful, and hope you meet a lot of exciting people out there. Thank you.